I'm happy to welcome up our expert panel, and Charles Alcock, our communications director at HeliOffshore, is going to lead that panel, talking about how we get excellence in our industry. So go over to you, Charles.
Thank you very much indeed. Very glad to be here. Can I please ask my fellow panelists to come up? I see several of them here. Audrey, hello. Please make your way up, safely of course. Perfect. And please, actually, if you could sit there, Audrey, that would be terrific. That's great. Yes, it's a last-minute seating plan. Please, Karl, there at the end. Excellent. Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We've got, I'm sure you'll agree, an excellent broad spectrum of expertise here from right across the stakeholder group at HeliOffshore. So to my immediate right is Audrey Brady, Vice President for Sikorsky Commercial Systems and Services, and obviously she's speaking from an OEM perspective. To Audrey's right, we have Erik Hamremoen, and Erik has enormous experience. You'll find a lot of background on all these good people in our conference brochure, but Erik is now advising the Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions as an aviation advisor, so he's speaking for all the people who go to work every day in helicopters, very important. That's why we're all here. A bit further along, we have Mr. Tony Cramp, Vice President for Aircraft with Shell and Managing Director of Shell Aircraft, so speaking as a customer, effectively. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Karl Fessenden, President and CEO of CHC Helicopter, and very significantly for us, a board member of HeliOffshore. So we're delighted to have you here. So let's try and get into some of the issues that we're wanting to resolve together. Erik, I'm going to start with you, if I may. Could you please give us a tangible example of how achieving excellence in safety has added significant value, and how adding this value benefited your organization or indeed the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I will try. For us in Norway, this is based on the joint effort by customers and trade unions, requiring the Norwegian Oil and Gas Guideline 066 as a basis and the requirement within the contract. And in addition to that, I would say that the helicopter safety studies, number 1 up till 3B today, 4 of them in total, the 5th one is already started, has also been a major contribution to the result that we see in the North Sea on the Norwegian side. As a result of that, we see that we have introduced latest technology helicopters. We got HAMS, TCAS, full flight level D simulator in Stavanger, and also de-ice blades on most of our helicopters today. And we have a modern maintenance trainer locally in Stavanger, and we are really proud of that, and we believe that that's what's contributing to the low risk level that we experience on the Norwegian side.
Good, thank you. That was very specific indeed. And Tony, you know, how would you pick that up? What might you add as an example of achieving excellence from your perspective?
Well, I think listening to Sir Matthew with the fantastic presentation before that, I think excellence is a relative term. And it's really about being that much better than everybody around you or what's gone before. And if we look back in the oil and gas industry to the 90s, we were killing a lot of people. There were a lot of helicopter accidents within Shell. We had a number of fatal accidents. We were killing a lot of people there. And if you talk about the value to the company, the culture that creates within an offshore workforce when they're taking on that level of risk, or perception of taking on that level of risk, transmits itself to everything else that's going on offshore. They normalize risk because they perceive that they're taking part in a high risk activity to even get to work, and that is going to change the culture of those guys when they're actually at work in a negative way. And I think if we look back to then what happened to the 2000s, and there's a lot of people in the room here who did a lot of work during that time. It was a time where we started introducing HUMS, where we introduced flight data monitoring, and a number of those systems. And those, together with a number of other changes that we as the industry put onto ourselves and put onto the activities we're doing, achieved a level of excellence compared with the decade before. It certainly wasn't perfect. We've improved since, but compared with what went before, it was a very significant change. And again, if you talk about the value of that to us as an oil company, it changed the perception of the workers again. All of a sudden, their risk tolerance changes because they feel they're not being exposed to the same level. That culture of excellence, when they can see the professionalism with which they're being taken to work on a daily basis, they start to understand more the engineering practices. If we're talking about hums and the way that improves engineering and reliability, that transmits itself to the other side of the industry as well. And there's huge value in that. And I think that is an example for me, and again, we heard from Sir Matthew, the bar's never high enough. You've never achieved the perfection, but you are looking to achieve excellence, and excellence is relative to what's gone before. So I think that's the perception I have in terms of value to us in the industry for those areas.
Much appreciated, Tony. And perhaps you could now pass. Oh, Karl, you have a microphone.
I have one.
So, what activities, Karl, would you highlight in terms of achieving excellence?
So, as Erik and Tony have spoken about, it's all about continuous improvement and understanding where you are at any time. So, what I would like to highlight is the program we've done over the past couple of years called LOSA, or Line Operations Safety Audits. This is where we have a trained pilot fly and observe the threats and the errors and the assessments of how our pilots or our crew actually perform. And it's not just how the crew performs, it's the threats and the challenges and the distractions that they get inside and outside of the cockpit. We've done this now in the North Sea. We've also done this in Australia. We're about to do this in Brazil. Every time we've done this, we've learned. We've learned because we have these standards, we have these policies, we have these procedures, but you don't always know if they actually work. When you do a LOSA audit, you actually can see if they work, and we've learned a lot. So we've changed the way we do checklists. As an example, in the S92, we had 75 items that our crew was responsible for going through. We've completely changed the way we do the checklist now. We actually do something called scan flow, which is a much more contemporary approach to the crew management and what they have to do. So I think that's a great example, and it's about continuous improvement and understanding, are you doing what you think you're doing, and if you're not, why not, and how do you change that to make everyone successful?
Yeah, great point, thank you. Audrey, what springs to mind when you hear what these gents are describing? What would you add to that?
Well, I just want to add, I mean, from an OEM perspective, having the ability for the collaboration. When we actually designed the S92, in addition to the flaw-tolerant design, we now have the benefit, the S92 just hit 1.5 million flight hours. We have the benefit because of the collaboration with the customers, we have all of that data. So with that data, we design the aircraft to a flight envelope. But with the hums, we actually understand how the aircraft is being used. We take all of that data, we take the design, that intent, we now have the ability for all of the OEMs to be able to collaborate on the data, understand the usage from the customer perspective, and build that into our design. So improve the safety, improve the reliability, understand how the aircraft is being used. So it is absolutely critical.
Thank you. That's great. And we're going to stay with you for a little while, Audrey, if we may. I'd like to look, further ahead, what other opportunities there might be to focus on excellence, and if you could try and tie it back to what value does that deliver, in the same measure.
Absolutely. I'd actually like to use a personal story. So a couple of years ago, I embarked on the journey of getting my helicopter pilot's license. And I did that for a number of reasons, personally. But to be able to get an understanding of really how the customer perspective is, to be able to relate to the customer on a whole completely different level. And of course, when you embark on that journey, the first thing that you learn when you get in the cockpit, again, understanding the technology, being an engineer, know how to build them, have done it for years. But then getting into the cockpit and knowing that, okay, 80% of your workload outside of that aircraft, understanding what the obstacles are. And the first thing that you're thinking is, if you're in the air, if there's an emergency, where am I going to land? As an OEM, we have the responsibility to look at the technology, to take it to a whole new level, and understand that, and working, we have this ability right now as an OEM, we have what's called matrix, to be able to eliminate the opportunity for CFIT accidents. But imagine a world where the helicopter itself will find that safe landing spot in the event of an emergency. But more importantly, to be able to eliminate the need for two of those most important things where it says land immediately, design those out of the aircraft and saying this is where the technology has to go. And Sikorsky has done this and making sure that the ability to be able to put it on any platform so that we can share that technology and say this is where the industry needs to go, because it's our responsibility to make sure that we're doing it. And that's the safety part of this.
Yeah, good point. Karl, let's go back to your end of the boat, if we may.
Helicopter. We're talking about helicopters.
Forgive me, I lost the track there. What opportunities do you see going forward? Where would you like to see the effort going?
So I think there's a couple. One, I think the Global SAR Forum is a huge opportunity to share and raise the bar. And by definition, the SAR aircraft face very risky and challenging situations. So I think I'm very excited by where that will head. And then I think the whole sharing and view on FDM and data, how we fly the aircraft, in HUMS, of course, how the aircraft responds, is really important. Because we have all this data, how do we use it? We use Tableau at CHC to kind of analyze the data and understand the best practices of how from an FDM perspective, we're flying the aircraft, and how we can share that best practice around the world and raise our standards. So I think those are the two areas.
Very good, thank you. Tony, back to you. Where do you believe the best opportunities lie going forward?
I wouldn't get too specific to start off. I'd say normalizing excellence across the board. I think we've all got areas that we see or we do that can perhaps fit into that category. The challenge for all of us as managers and leaders is normalizing that across your whole organization and really achieving that to get the results. Conversation last night with somebody as an operator who was saying that a couple of years ago, they suddenly got a telephone call from one of the OEMs telling them about a problem that they had with one of their aircraft that they hadn't realized they had. And it was the first time they'd really seen that behavior from one of the OEMs. And it suddenly changed the feeling for that OEM because they felt they weren't necessarily on their own and they were part of a much bigger, joined up airworthiness organization. And I think when we look at what we've achieved through HUMS back through the 2000s, how it's going in, how that's fitting in with airworthiness organizations, the collaboration now between engineering departments in the operators and the OEMs, that is a pocket of excellence. Let's go after it. Why would we not want to be doing that on every aircraft with every OEM, with every operator? That should become normalized. Mm-hmm. If we're looking at the crews, what Karl was just saying there about the LOSA operations, we're seeing a huge amount of benefit where they come out and an awareness of what's going on in the cockpit. So you're taking flight data monitoring to another level. You're introducing threat and area management, which again is pretty commonplace in a lot of the fixed wing world, but is not something that's talked about in a lot of the helicopter world. So again, picking those up, talking, collaborating, make sure we know what best practice is so we can react quickly to get those areas of excellence and normalize them across our organizations.
Thank you very much, Tony. Erik, back to you. I believe you've got at least one eye on the fixed wing world as you consider what opportunities there could be going forward. Could you just spell out for us where you think the effort should go? I think you had a couple of areas you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, we believe that closing the gap to fixed wing is the way forward. And two areas of really springs to mind here. One is to continue to work towards achieving hands-off fully coupled flights and approaches down to minima. We have started that work, and it's still work we need to continue on working on to achieve any results globally. I think that's going to enhance the safety within aviation offshore. And in addition to that, continue to work to reduce the number of land immediatelys and land as soon as possible where you need to land on the sea. So basically work on reducing the land immediately situations. This will ensure safe return of flight to land rig without a need for sea landing.
Thank you, Erik. Audrey, I'd like to very quickly go back to you, if I may. You talked about the work that you as an OEM are doing on improving reliability and the significance of targeting that. Perhaps you could just touch on how, focusing on return to base events is an important part of that equation.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in depth tomorrow.
Good.
But looking at our designs, again, taking that data and making sure that we are designing in, understanding why there are return to bases. So again, a lot of technology that we are working on specifically will eliminate 75% of those return to bases. So those are the things that it is our responsibility to make sure that we're doing, but to put back into the industry and making sure that we're collaborating to show, all of that data that we're collecting as a team here actually makes a difference in removing those land immediatelys. We understand that we have to make sure, in order to make this safety work, that we're designing it into the product.
Yeah. Excellent point, thank you. So in a few minutes, we're going to widen this conversation to our colleagues out here on the floor, which will be a great thing. Before that, I'm going to ask each of you to reflect on what we all, as a safety community, could be doing to unlock the value of this work. In other words, not just doing the work, significant as it is, but demonstrating the value of doing it. And what key actions you feel would help us to pursue safety excellence in the most effective way. So, Karl, what would you highlight in that regard?
I think it's kind of simple. It's all that leadership matters. That's why we're here, and we need to dedicate resources to support the work streams and the good work and set the safety culture in the industry.
Thank you. And Erik, in your view, what's the recipe for success in the direction we're going?
I believe that working together is important. It helps us to optimize the use of our resources and to pool our knowledge and to speak with one voice on where we can make the difference within aviation safety.
Excellent, thank you. Tony, what about you? What stands out in your view?
There's a couple of things that stand out, but I'd be wasting the platform here if I said it was just opportunity. At the moment, there's risk in there as well. So there's opportunity from everything that's been set up here. But what we're starting to see in the current climate in the industry is those areas where we have achieved excellence and where we've got the opportunity to do are being whittled away, and we're seeing some slippage at the moment. And I think one of the key elements of that is we talked about collaboration, sharing data, sharing best practice. So the arguments can be made to the bean counters, to the creditors of a lot of the companies at the moment, because a lot of what we've talked about here and said has been excellence in our industry. In some areas, they're being considered as easy wins to save money, to perhaps cut out people, to cut out processes within the operations. That's a real worry for me. Because I think we've got in danger here of slipping back, having accidents as a result of that, which are going to affect everybody. And the ability to really show what is excellent, use the data and the collaboration, share it in that way, so that you can make the arguments to the creditors, to the finance guys, to the customers, that they need to be investing in that as well. And I think unless we can make those arguments and use the data, we're not only in danger of missing opportunities to go forward, we're in danger of slipping backwards.
Yeah, well said. Audrey, what else might be missing from this?
I would say in one word, I just think the most important thing is the communication, right? It's all of our responsibilities, the leadership, us setting the example, the behaviors that we have. So over the last 4 years, lots have happened in this organization. We need to establish the opportunity for more communication, sharing some of the things that we've done with the FCOM, the HTOS, a lot of the things that we've done together. But the communication is really the key in order for us to be able to take it outside of this room, share it with our organizations, but the entire industry, which is absolutely critical.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, I think everybody can see that what we're doing right now is an important part of the communication, and of course we do want it to be a two-way communication channel. So that's what we're going to be doing in a moment. And this conference really is just one part of our shared collaboration at HeliOffshore. It's it's very much the pinnacle of our year. But this is going on week in, week out, day in, day out, and we're certainly grateful for the contributions that your companies make to that.